Welcome back to the Something in the Wilderness podcast. My name's Steve, and in each episode of the show, we talk about an Andrew McMahon song, we deep dive into it, and hopefully we learn a little bit more about the music at the same time. So we're back in the wilderness era this episode, and today I have a guest joining me to talk about what this song means to her. And to be honest, this song is one I've been looking forward to talking about for a couple of years. I always kind of wondered when and how this song was going to come up, and so when Aly recommended this song, I jumped at it. So welcome to the show, Aly.
Thank you. Really excited to talk with you about this song. I love this song.
Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm 30 years old. I live in Northwest Michigan. I'm originally from Wisconsin, so shout out to all those Midwest shows that I've been to. I love going to concerts, and Andrew McMahon has always been a favorite of mine to go to. So yeah, I've been a big fan of Andrew for a long time.
When did his music first find you anyway?
Well, probably in high school. I think the first album that I really listened to was Glass Passenger, and I was just transfixed. Like, I loved it, and I felt like it was just singing to me. Like, it felt so personal to me, that album. And then I kind of fell out of Andrew McMahon for several years. I didn't see any of his concerts. I didn't really follow him. And then finally I think it was 2014, my older brother begged me to see him. And this was in Andrew's days between the end of Jack's and the beginning of the Wilderness.
Okay.
And he begged me to go see him in Bloomington, Illinois. And I was like, okay, fine. We drove hours to go to this tiny Castle Theater in Bloomington, Illinois. And that was like the true jumping off point of my fandom. I never stopped listening after that. I was obsessed. We were both obsessed. And it like became the thing that my brother and I would do together every single time Andrew McMahon had a tour. So
that's really cool that you guys have that bond between the two of you, siblings with liking the same artist.
Yes, it has been so special to experience that with him. Like, we have traveled all around the country to see Andrew together, and it feels like it's our thing. And I love that, and something I never expected would happen with my brother and I, but it's been really, really special.
So he didn't introduce you to Andrew's music initially, but he kind of brought you back, would you say?
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
So you missed everything in transit, and you had to go back then.
Yeah, I think I had heard Dark Blue, and I had heard some of these more popular songs, but I didn't really pay close attention to everything in transit. Like, it was really Glass Passenger that the album as a unit was really just mind-blowing to me.
Got your attention.
Just loved it. Yeah.
Okay, very cool. And are you also a Something Corporate fan?
Well, this is another example of me going back through the catalog. I became a Something Corporate fan after I had been seeing Andrew since 2014. So I had to go back through the catalog and become a fan of Something Corporate. But it sang to my little emo high school heart. So I loved it. I was like, why didn't I find this decades ago?
Right. There's still music from that genre, from that era, that I'm discovering nowadays. When I say discover, I mean I'm just paying attention to for the first time, I guess. And it is surprising. So it's kind of like when you heard Something Corporate and you said, why wasn't I in on this? I'm still finding music from 20 years ago that I'm like, yeah, why wasn't I in on that at the time? I was listening to everything else around it. But I was curious about Something Corporate because some people are really big Jax fans and some people are really big Wilderness fans, or both. And then some people have told me, I went back to Something Corporate and it's fine, but it doesn't affect me like the newer stuff does. So I was just curious about that.
Yeah, I'm a fan of all of it. All of it speaks to me in a different way, and it's fun. It's kind of like you get to evolve with Andrew over time and rediscover things that you never really noticed before. And I feel like this is what a lot of fans are experiencing who love Taylor Swift, with her re-recordings of all of her old albums. People are rediscovering her music in a way that I don't think people had done before. So I think, yeah, there's kind of some parallels there, which is kind of cool.
Right on, definitely. There's definitely been some Andrew eras, so when he does his Eras tour, maybe we'll. I mean, he kind of does. Let's face it, he does every show. He does an Eras show every time, but he just doesn't break it up.
Show.
Well, the song we're talking about today has been a standout track to me, at least, in the Wilderness era, just about since the moment I heard it. When I hear this one, I think of road trips, getting older, reflecting on the past. And I also think about that glorious piano melody because how could you not? This is top tier Andrew McMahon in the Wilderness, in my opinion. I think you might agree, but I'm sure we'll get into that. But if someone asked me what I love about Andrew's music, this is one place I'd point them. I would say, listen to this song. This is what I love about Andrew McMahon's music, his songwriting, his piano, and everything. And we're going to get into all of that. The title itself makes me think of, like I said, road trips and good times I've had on them. So the song we're talking about today is Maps for the Getaway. It's by Andrew McMahon in the Wilderness, of course. It was track 10, the final track on the self-titled Wilderness debut album released on October 14th, 2014. Do you have a good road trip story? So like I said, I think of road trips when I hear this song a little bit.
So this was right after I kind of became an Andrew McMahon fan.
Oh, nice.
I was going to grad school in Richmond, Virginia, and I was moving from Wisconsin to Virginia. And my mom and my brother and I packed up my tiny little Mazda, and we just stuffed everything we could possibly fit into that car, including a bicycle. And we drove all the way through the night. It was like after work, we left Wisconsin and we drove all the way through the night, through the Blue Ridge Mountains, all the way over to Richmond, Virginia. Mm-hmm. And we had such a fun time on that trip. We made jokes and we got stuck in Indiana for 3 hours in a standstill. We just, there were so many things about that trip that were just so crazy and silly. And it was kind of abnormal to be doing it in the middle of the night, like do this overnight road trip. But it was so fun. And we talk about it all the time. Like when we get together for the holidays, we mention it often. And it is definitely my favorite road trip. Like we have songs that we still sing from that road trip. And I feel like this song, The Maps, reminds me of that road trip.
Oh, that's amazing.
It's like the perfect song to be screaming out your car windows while you're driving. Perfect. Perfect. There's no better song, really.
Now, I don't know what year that road trip was in, but was this song in that, did you actually listen to this song on that road trip? Do you know?
I think we did, actually, because that road trip was in 2015 and this song was out by then. So, yeah, I mean, my brother and I were definitely bumping Andrew McMahon in the car.
This would have been the album.
Trip. Yeah, it would have been the album. Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, so cool. It does seem that when I think of memorable road trips, I do think of those overnight road trips. I don't know why, what it is about them, or late night road trips, let's say, that make them so memorable. I don't know. I remember this time, it was the last day of high school, and my buddies and I were all invited over to this party, and it was a really low-key party. No bad things for a 17-year-old to get into at this party. It was just chilling around a bonfire. We were hanging out, and I guess we kind of got bored or whatever, or we decided to leave. And three of us, my friends Dave and Dan, I don't know, someone came up with this silly idea, stupid idea, I would even say. You know what? Let's drive to Chicago. Now, this is north of Detroit, 5 hours away from Chicago. It's about 10 o'clock at night on like a Wednesday or Thursday. And we are teenagers with teenage jobs and 17, expected to be home at some point. And we're like, we're going to drive to Chicago. I guess we just had this idea that the world was our oyster. Like, oh, we're out of high school. We're free. We can do whatever we want now. But we couldn't really. And so we got in the car and we drove like several hours on I-94 from Detroit toward the west side of Michigan. And I don't remember how far we made it, but at some point we realized that between the three of us, we had about $10 total in our wallet. And granted, we had no idea what we were going to do in Chicago when we got there. So it wasn't like we were going to go to a museum or a ball game or like what, I don't know what we were going to do. It's not like we were going to go overnight. We just thought we were going to drive to Chicago and then back in the same night or something. I have no idea. But the fact is we couldn't even make it based on the amount of money we had in our wallets because we didn't have credit cards at the time. And I'm really dating myself now when I say this was before everybody had cell phones. So if we had gotten stranded, we would have been out of luck. So we turned around somewhere in western Michigan and just went home, made it home by like 3 a.m. But it's funny how a song like this reminds me of times like that long before this song even existed, long before I ever heard it, of course. But that's one of the things I love about this song, that it kind of takes me back to those simpler times, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. It's very like a reminiscing type of song.
You've already gave me a really good memory of maybe one of those early times of you hearing it or singing along to it. But do you remember when you first heard this song or when you first got the album? Do you remember what that felt like? I honestly
Mm.
have trouble with that. I don't.
Yeah, I can't remember the first time. I do remember that it was a standout on the album for me. Like I
Same.
remember this song really stood out to me. I thought it was beautiful and so lyrically lovely. Like I just thought it was so amazing. And I mean, it was immediately my favorite on the album, for sure. For
Okay.
sure.
The song was produced by Andrew McMahon, Mike Viola, and James Flanagan, who produced the majority of that album. The players on the track were Andrew on piano and vocals, additional keyboards by James Flanagan and Andrew, bass by Mike Viola, and programming done by James Flanagan, Mike Viola, and Jake Sinclair. Let's talk about live shows. We realized the other day when we chatted before we recorded that we were at the same live show recently, Grand
Mm-hmm.
Rapids, Michigan, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've seen Andrew quite a few times, huh?
So many. Like
Yeah.
definitely over 20. I think it's
hmm
probably closer to 30, but it's hard to keep track of all of the times.
Now, did you ever get to see him in his Jack's Mannequin era, or has that just been since Andrew Band in the Wilderness?
No, it's like such a regret in my life that I never saw him in Milwaukee in his Jack's era. I have only seen him in his Wilderness era, but I'm sad. I never took the opportunity to see him when he came to Milwaukee. Because there were lots of times when I could have. I
Yeah,
remember times when I was asked and I was like, nah, I'm good. Kind
yeah.
of kick myself for it, but
I have a similar. I try not to, but I have a similar kind of regret. I think of, wow, he's been touring not every year, but a lot of the years in the 20 years I've known about his music. And for some reason, I sat most of them out. I was just like, yeah, Jack's Mannequin's coming around, cool, something corporate. I saw them a couple times. I saw Jack's Mannequin a couple of times. But yeah, the majority of my time seeing him in concert has been in the last, let's say, 9 years. So,
well, and he
but yeah,
tours so much. Like,
yeah, which
I mean,
helps
now he's touring. He tours like every year, if not
every
twice a
single
year.
year. Yeah,
So we are lucky that we get the opportunity to see him so much.
I agree with you. I don't think we should take that for granted because a lot of people with their favorite artists, they have to wait years. Taylor Swift being an example, we mentioned her earlier.
Totally.
And yeah, you have to wait, what, 5 years? And then you have to try to get a ticket and hope you get a ticket to one of the shows.
Yeah.
We're pretty fortunate that we get to see Andrew in intimate venues and that he hits many cities around us, those of us that live in the Midwest. He loves his Midwest fans, I can tell.
Yeah, he
So,
treats us very well.
yeah. He did not play Maps for the Getaway in Grand Rapids, but I did find out the last time he played it was in Berlin, Germany recently. So he was recently over in Europe, as a lot of people know. And he did play Maps for the Getaway over there. And total, he's played it 194 times, which seems like a lot. I feel like that's a lot. And I've read these numbers on this podcast over and over, and I've seen like 400 and 500 for those super popular songs that we all know and love. But I would say this is up there at almost 200 times.
Hmm.
What do you make of that? I mean, I love the song, but it doesn't seem like a concert song. It wasn't a single. It wasn't. Is it a fan favorite? I don't know.
I mean, he's played it on a lot of different tours, and some of those tours, it's like a part of the regular set list.
hmm
And I think that, I mean, he's played it in kind of a slowed down version, and he's also played it in the, normal, like recorded version that we all know and love. And I kind of feel like this song has a special place in his heart because he's brought it back even when this album is 9 years old now. I
Yeah.
mean, that's dedication to a song that you love and a song that you want to keep talking about and bringing back. And I think it doesn't really surprise me because if we think about the content of the song, we reminisce about our road trips. I think that he probably brings the song up over and over again because it's reminiscent for him too.
Yeah, it's a big part of his life. I think it was an important part of his life that he's looking back on in the song. I agree. I think it is an important song to him. It is surprising to me then that he didn't play it on the Three Pianos tour, as far as I could tell. Maybe somewhere here or there. I don't know, but I don't think he played it on the majority of it, if any of it. But I was thinking about the times, and I did have to go back on Setlist FM and look. I know that 3 of the times I've seen this live, if not the only 3 times, have all been in Michigan. And he played it at I went to this radio festival back in 2015. The album had only been out just less than a year, and he was opening for co-headliners Weezer and Panic at the Disco at this radio fest. He was opening for them. He played 9 songs, and one of them was Maps for the Getaway. And that may be part of the reason I have a special connection with this song, because so my wife was there with me and 3 other friends of ours who didn't know who Andrew was. And I remember them saying, like, yeah, he's pretty good. Yeah, I liked his music. And I was so happy because, when you are with friends at a concert of an artist that you love, you hope that they love what you love. And, they were there for Weezer or Panic, and I was too, don't get me wrong, but I like that they enjoyed the Andrew set. But I was just surprised that he played that, out of the ones you'd expect, Synesthesia, Sicilian the Satellite, those early Wilderness era songs. But Maps for the Getaway was one of them, along with All Our Lives, by the way, which is another great one.
So good.
So, yeah, and then, of course, probably Dark Blue, if I'm remembering correctly. But I also saw this song performed at the Pod shows in Pontiac in 2021. So I looked that up, and I was like, yeah, he did play it both nights that weekend, which was interesting but cool.
And what year was that?
That was 2021. So that was when we were first shows back from the pandemic. They set up these little barricades. You and the people you came with were within your own barricade. And they called them pods. So it was the next evolution, let's say, from the drive-in shows. And I did look back and saw that he was playing this song during the drive-in shows as well, which kind of explains him playing it so much. He played it all that time coming back 2021. So yeah, the song's been around, and I feel like he plays it quite a bit. Do you know if you've seen this song live? Because I know he didn't play it in Grand Rapids.
For sure. I've definitely seen this song played live. He used to have it on his set lists a lot in the early years of this album being out. I've seen it many times. I'll tell a story about when he played it once upon a time at one of the shows I was at. He always does like a little intro about the song, about the backstory of the song, or about why he wrote it. Shout out to Rainy Girl for being like one of the best stories about the backstory of the song. But I'll get back to Maps. So I heard him play Maps, and he started off the story and the song saying, this was like about when I was living in this big house with my wife and working at the post office. I was like, what?
Never heard that one before.
He said, and I'd love to know if others who listen to this podcast can confirm this, but I swear he said, I worked for a post office for a little amount of time at one time in my life. I think this certainly is the reference to No Job with the Government in the lyrics of the song.
Oh, okay. Making the connection.
And so he said that he like worked for the post office, and he was living in this big house, and that they used to like party in this house, and like it was supposed to be like that they had the dream, and they like weren't happy, and they were like, we got to leave. We gotta leave this house. Like this, we're not happy here. We got to get out. And that they like packed up and moved away. And yeah, I just thought that it was interesting that this song was about moving on, and moving away from something.
Yeah, that's a new nugget of information that I didn't know. I knew this was a reference to the house on Silver Lake or in Silver Lake, but I didn't know. So you think he worked for the post office during that time?
I don't remember if he said if it was during that time or if he just said I did work for the post office at one time, but I had never heard him say that, and I was like totally blown away. I was like, what? That feels like it's very out of left field for him.
Yeah, it
I can't imagine him working at a post office.
I can't either, but I suppose, and I'm trying to think of like what the time frame would have been for that in his life from what we know, and thinking about, we only know Andrew, for the most part, we all only know Andrew McMahon through his music and lyrics and his touring schedule and his album cycles. So it's like, that's how we tend to think of his life. And I'm like, where in that was this? But I have no idea.
I don't either. I feel like the next time that I have a chance to chat with him, I should ask him. I should do a little follow-up interview about his post office days. Oh
yeah, we need to know. So if you find out, let me know. Let us know. And if anybody out there listening, like Aly said, knows any more about that, I'd want to hear more. So that's pretty cool. I wonder if that is where the reference and the lyric come from, and it does make sense. that's a lyric there that I never gave much thought to. But now that you mention it, yeah, I mean, I just thought he was using as an example of a regular person,
Right,
regular
right.
jobs, average jobs or something.
Yeah, and that's why I love that he tells those stories before
Hmm.
he plays a lot of shows, especially in
It's the
like
best.
the shows that aren't for a whole tour. Like the between tour shows are the best ones, in my opinion,
Yes.
because you get all that personality to the songs. Like he talks about all of these songs and talks about all the stories behind them. And I love getting that kind of behind the scenes of all of his songs. It's so fun. Feel like I
Oh,
get to
yeah.
know secrets.
Yeah, when we saw him in Indy in June, it was like that. It was him and a piano just telling stories, and it was amazing. It was one of my favorite Andrew shows of all time. I love the stories. It makes it more personal, and I'm sure he
Totally.
knows that. I'm sure he's aware, and that if we connect through the music more, we're gonna love it more. We're gonna come out more. So, but that's
Hmm.
cool. Did you watch the Instagram live streams when he was doing those back in 2020?
A little bit in like the very
Hmm.
early pandemic days I did. So this was like, probably March through July of 2020.
Yeah,
I was watching them. Yeah.
I did have written down that he did the song early on in March, early on in the pandemic, I should say, in March. And I just remember I noted this for some reason, and I just remember being surprised that there were 5,000 people watching because you could see
Hmm.
when on Instagram Live how many people are watching at the same time, and it was 5,000 people, and I just remember being blown like, wow, 5,000 people are watching the same guy perform music on Instagram right now. Just
Yeah,
such
like
a
in his house at his piano. Like
such a weird time in our lives, but like I don't know, that probably doesn't happen nearly as much anymore. But
we were all like reaching for
yeah,
connection,
yeah, we were just
like we
like,
all wanted that so badly.
yeah, what else were we doing? We needed something. So, and Andrew needed it too. So
Hmm.
this song was written by Andrew himself, Mike Viola, and James Flanagan, the same team that produced the song. Every time I read that, and I said this on the very last episode I just did about Nobody Tells You When You're Young, I'm always surprised when we get these really personal lyrics and it seems like a really personal song. I don't know why, but I'm surprised that there's co-writers, but I have to remind myself that co-writing isn't necessarily like these other people brought him ideas. It could be they just helped him flesh it out.
Hmm.
We don't know. They're listed as co-writers, but I think it's this mentality I've had for too much of my life where I used to have this purist attitude, like where, oh my gosh, if a songwriter didn't write, wasn't the sole songwriter on the song, or just the people in the band, quote unquote, didn't write the song, then like, who are these other people that came in and helped him write it? But after doing this podcast for a few years, the way I've started to view the wilderness is a little bit different than I perceived it prior to that, and that's Andrew McMahon in the Wilderness is basically Andrew McMahon and whoever he wants to work with at that time.
Hmm.
Songwriting, playing instruments, on stage, whatever. So we still get the mostly the same core group of people on stage, but on the albums, it's kind of anything goes. Like whoever he feels like working with at the time. Which
Yeah, it's funny. This is like a total tangent. So I lived in Virginia, lived in Richmond for 5 years going to grad school. And Richmond, I found out when I lived there that Richmond is a very special place to Andrew and has been for a really long time. Bobby is from Richmond.
oh yeah, I
They
did
have they
remember
have like
that.
a core. Well, I think I had asked Andrew about it one time, and they used Richmond as kind of a hub. Like when they were traveling with
Hmm.
Jax on the East Coast, they would go to shows and then they'd return back to Richmond and go to other shows and return back to Richmond because Richmond's kind of right in the middle.
Hmm.
And it became kind of their hub, and so it was really fun to live there and feel like I was in their spot for a while. Like they went to this there were funny stories from this restaurant at the place called Ipanema in Richmond. They would like be rowdy at that restaurant, and there's just lots of Richmond stories about Andrew McMahon
Hmm.
and like Jax and the band, and I just feel like it's a special part of their kind of history, and it's a
Hmm.
special part of mine. And so it's this weird kind of intersection where I felt super close to the band at that time because I was like, man, I feel like I'm living in your history a little bit. And I've like heard him reference certain hotels in Richmond and just
Yeah.
just so many things. It's so strange. And so it was always really special seeing him in Richmond. I always felt like, oh, we're all back home.
Oh, that would be. It's surprising that there's not more lyrics about Virginia, but yeah, what you're saying all makes sense, and that leads me to believe there should be a song about Richmond.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
Andrew, get on it.
still, still,
No,
still waiting on that one.
he references Richmond in a Jack song, I think it
Does
is,
he?
but I don't remember which one it is.
Oh, pop quiz. Yeah, I don't know. I can't think of it off the
I
top of my
can't
head.
remember
So
off the top of my head either. Dang. Wish I had come with that fun fact.
I've got a very long document with every Andrew McMahon lyric on it. A little
Oh
peek
my
behind the
gosh.
curtain, so I can search words like that.
Oh man, it's going to bug me. But he references Richmond and talks about being in a hotel, and that hotel was the Linden Row Inn.
Okay.
And so he like talked about it in an interview or something one time.
I don't know that I've ever been in Richmond. I've driven through it, but not exactly been in it before.
It's a
So
fun spot. It's a
yeah.
fun spot. Great for food. Highly
Well,
recommend. And there's a lot of bands that come there, which is great. Like it's a pretty small city
mm-hmm.
relatively, and so it's cool that it gets a lot of love from bands either going to Charlottesville, which I've seen Andrew there lots of times,
Mm-hmm.
or going to Richmond. So
Oh,
I feel like
cool.
I got the best of all the worlds being there for concerts.
Oh yeah. I lived about an hour and a half from there for 4 years, but never went down there for some reason. I don't know. I should have gone for an Andrew concert.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
But
The Charlottesville shows were so fun because it's like a tiny little venue
mm-hmm.
and it felt so intimate. Like I loved going to shows in Charlottesville because the shows just felt like you were in a cozy little spot together listening to this beautiful music, and it always felt so fun. And I used to drag my friends over to Charlottesville, on
Mm-hmm.
like a Tuesday, be like,
Yeah.
"Hey, do you want to go to this show with me in Charlottesville? I'll drive."
Yeah. My opinion, I see this song as having the idea of identity and leaving behind who you are, moving forward. Sometimes that includes tying up loose ends, simplifying things in your life, maybe leaving behind some baggage in the past to benefit your future, maybe. We already mentioned the fact that the song references a home he had with Kelly in Silver Lake. But have you heard the story about, I'm sure you heard the story then in concert where he tells about him parking outside of the house?
Yes, yes. And he's like being a creeper. There's probably
Yeah.
people looking out like, who's
Looking
this
out the
dude?
windows. Yeah, he's like, if they ever looked out the windows and wondered why there was a guy writing in a notebook sitting outside their house, that was just me. So, but here's the crazy thing about that story is that I can identify with that. I don't know if you have any past homes in your life that you've driven by and just been fascinated by, but I lived in the same house for the first 18 years of my life, and my parents still live about a half hour away, maybe just under a half hour away from there. And every time I go visit them in Michigan, just north of Detroit, I have to drive by that house. Now, I don't go park outside their house and write in a notepad or stare through the windows, but I do drive by slowly every time. So I don't know. At this point, they might even recognize my car and be like, every once in a while, like every few months, this person or family drives by because I drag my wife and kids with me usually. This family drives by and just like looks at the house. Do you have a past house like that you do that for, or past residence?
I mean, there are certainly places that, I make a point to go see, whenever I visit home, whenever I visit Wisconsin, or I wanna go visit friends or something. There's certain things I want to see or places I want to revisit.
I completely get that because the way I feel about this house is like I have such deep rooted early memories tied to that place. And it's fascinating to me. It's like that was the only home I knew for 18 years. Then we just left. And, all on good terms. Everything was, I went to college. My parents got a different house nearby. But when I left, it's like when I go back there, I'm like, someone else lives in that house. Someone else has had memories longer than I've been, I was ever there. The same guy's been in that house. When I drive by, I look at the yard, I look at the trees and the way they look, and I try to like, while I'm driving by, I look in the backyard. I look at the neighbors' houses and how the woods we used to play in, because there was some woods there. There used to be a field, but that's now a house. But I just, I don't know. It's fascinating to me. I can understand why it was nostalgic and even inspirational to Andrew to go like sit outside of his house where he had these really deep rooted memories and there was something about that house for him. So I'm going to read you a quote from an article that I found. This is the one from gardenstatement.com. By the way, a little peek behind the curtain. So this quote I'm going to read is from an article that allegedly, apparently no longer exists out on the internet. Years ago, when I first started preparing this podcast, I was picking random songs that I would listen to or hear on the live streams, which is a lot of what inspired me to do this podcast. And I started making notes, and I had a separate document for every song. And I added this quote to that document, but I can't find that article anymore. It's gone.
Wow.
But it no longer exists. Anyway, so yeah, I've had this quote for a couple of years. It's nothing too, wild or revealing, but I just thought it was a nice quote. The writer says, perhaps the best song to display McMahon's commitment to going into the wilderness in search of meaning, however, is the closing track, Maps for the Getaway. The song is McMahon's way of looking back at his past with weary-eyed resilience as he notes, the years of hope, the months of rain, now that we're outside it, I guess we survived it after all. It almost comes across as a eulogy to his past projects and the image of himself that was associated with that era. It's a wistful and nostalgic eulogy, though, and not an elegy. McMahon then turns his sights toward the future in his search for purpose. No cash in the bank, no paid holidays. All we have is gas in the tank, maps for the getaway. All we have is time. McMahon sings as the album comes to a close.
I completely agree with the sound of the song. Like, it's totally ethereal and wistful, and there's like a longing that you can feel in it. And I mean, I think it's one of his best lyrics in a song. It's so poignant. And I completely agree with the quote. Completely. It's perfect to me.
What do you think about that? It's a eulogy of his past, maybe. It's kind of closing the door, saying goodbye.
Yeah, I think that lines up with the, songs, or the stories rather, that he tells before singing this song at concerts. So I think it makes sense.
From what he said about this song and what we've read and what we've heard him say is, it sounds like it was like therapy, kind of getting through that chapter. I mean, this is the time frame when, it was recovering from cancer, and maybe before or right around the time that he and Kelly were married, but he was struggling with a lot of mental health issues. Maybe this was his way of kind of wrapping his head around what that was all about and moving forward past that, and needing to get past it, for lack of a better phrase. Well, here's another quote from a different review, and this is a glowing review, by the way, from hiddenjams.com, back when this album first came out. Amanda at hiddenjams.com says, this one feels like a perfect balance between seeing memories of the past and being content in the present. Andrew sings, I guess we survived it after all. He declares that, quote, there's no sign of yesterday. All we have is time. Despite the big breakup and life-or-death battle with leukemia, and in spite of the years of aftermath following that trial, Andrew and his high school sweetheart Kelly made it through. They survived the hardest times of their lives, and now all they have is the future with their new daughter Cecilia. It's a perfect summation of the whole record, and a great note to end it on. Seems like every review I read of this, and I think I've read at least 3 of them, say it's the perfect ending to the album.
Could not agree more.
Yeah, I like how it kind of, that one gives a little bit more detail about, that's why I saved that one for second, because it gives a little bit more detail about, okay, here were the things he was going through in his life that he kind of had to either recover from or come to terms with, all the changes in his life to be present in his family. And so again, it was probably therapy for him to write songs like this.
I think I hear a lot of like gratitude in the song. I hear a lot of like looking back and saying, oh my God, that was traumatic. Like that was bad. Like that was crazy what we went through. But saying, wow, even though all of that happened, like, look at us. We're still here. Like, we're still here. We're doing it. We're here beside each other. And I'm so thankful for that. I'm so glad that we're here. I'm glad that we made it. It kind of feels like a toast, like a champagne toast. Like, thank goodness we made it.
So you don't think this is a sad song then?
No.
It's quite the opposite, or?
I think it's an optimistic song. I think it's reminiscent, but I think I just hear gratitude. I hear him being thankful for, getting through it together, and that they still made it out. Like they made it out and they were okay, and they're still doing okay.
It's an interesting dynamic in the song because I hear pain, and you kind of alluded to that with something you said earlier. I hear it was hard. It was very difficult at times. So I hear that pain in the lyrics, but also in the way he sings it at times. But yeah, I think the end message is I like that. I didn't think about it that way, but gratitude's a great word for it. Just like you, I can't agree with it more that this is the perfect ending to the album. I think it wraps it up quite nicely. This song represents pretty much everything I like about that album. What an ending, and yeah, it's up there for me too. Let's talk a little bit more about the song. So, or about the sound of the song, I should say. So I sent you an article last night about where this writer from AbsolutePunk.net, Craig Manning, I want to give a disclaimer on this as well. So he compares it to a couple of songs. If you read through the whole article, he compares a lot of songs on this album to a lot of other songs. I feel like that's his go-to. It's like, well, this one's like that, and this one's like this, and this one's like a combination of those two. It kind of lost its luster. Like, this comparison lost its luster after I read the entire article, and I was like, well, not everything has to sound like something else. But I do the same thing. I try to put things in a bucket. Like, this is like, when I hear a new Andrew song, like when his new music came out earlier this year, and the singles were out at the end of last year, I was like, where does this fit? Is this Jack's Mannequin? Is this early Wilderness? Is this something I haven't heard before? Is this Zombies era? So I get trying to put things in a bucket. It's hard not to do. But I feel like he relied on that trope a lot with his writing. I don't know. Did you think that, or like, and we'll get into the details of it, but was there some merit to some of the things he said?
He referenced it sounding like Rescued by Jax. After I read that, I listened to Rescued because I was like, I don't know if it sounds like Rescued. So I had to go back and listen to it. I did the same thing. But I definitely see what the writer meant when they said that it sounds like Rescued, because I think it has that big swelling kind of build throughout the song like Rescued does. And like when it gets to the bridge, it's like Andrew's practically like yelling those lyrics in the bridge, which I'm obsessed with that.
In Rescued?
In Maps.
Oh, Maps for the Getaway.
He's like saying those lyrics with such force, and it feels like it's just building to this like punchline.
I'm sorry, I was confused. I was like yelling in Rescue. I feel like he was like more crying, but
yeah. No, in Maps it feels like there's this kind of big swell, and I think Andrew does it with both the lyrics and with the actual song in the background. But in Rescued, I think it's much more with the sound of the song in the background. So in that way, I felt like I could see the resemblance a little bit.
I mean, the passion is definitely there, and a little bit of melody in the chorus of Rescued, I would say. They're two great songs with a piano by the same guy. I realized when I made a playlist after reading that article of Maps for the Getaway and this other song we're going to talk about that he compared it to, and Rescued, I was like, okay, if I'm looking that closely, maybe it's not that close at all, for me at least. But I don't have the musical ear that a lot of people have, though. So there are a lot of things I miss, I'll admit. So I'd be curious to hear from anybody else who hears these comparisons that he's making with saying the melody follows the same melody as Rescued. But I didn't hear it, well, or very little, let's say. Another one he compared it to was he said the synthesizer channels the melody of Edge of 17 from 1982 by Stevie Nicks. Did you get that at all?
I also listened to The Edge of 17 by Stevie Nicks after I saw that reference, and I did not hear it. I was like, I think of like totally opposite things when I think of those songs. So I could not get myself into the brain space to hear that, but who am I to judge?
I was just curious though. I sang along The Edge of 17 with the lyrics that I knew anyway to Maps for the Getaway to see if it worked, and it didn't work very well. Yeah, I tried it. I was like, I'm not gonna perform that here, but I'll save everybody's ears. But
you gave it a good whirl.
Yeah, I did. It was just me at home, so I was like, okay, the house is quiet, nobody's around, nobody can hear this, me belting out Stevie Nicks. So I will say, if you're listening and you don't know the song for some reason, Edge of 17, check it out. It's a great song. If you're more of a modern music fan only, then Miley Cyrus has covered it, and if you're a little bit older like me, Lindsay Lohan also covered it like 15 years ago. So check out Stevie Nicks' version or any of the covers. That's fine too. Yeah, so I made a playlist and I just thought it was funny by the end of it because I was like, okay, I think I'm trying too hard to find the comparison here. I've mentioned these guys on the podcast before, but there's these 80s basically pop rock singers. They came from the classic rock world, and they're the ones I feel like Andrew was channeling more on this album, and that's Don Henley, Bruce Hornsby, and Phil Collins. If you listen to those guys' greatest hits albums from the late 80s, or I don't know when they came out, maybe early 90s, but it was of their 80s work, I feel like that's the sound he was channeling. I feel like he's very inspired by that. And I'm sure there's other artists, but those are probably the most popular in that type of sound, and that's why I know them. They were always on the radio when I was growing up, and my parents were listening to them. But I think that's why a song like Maps for the Getaway reminds me of my childhood, because I'm like, it's that sound. It's those synths and the piano and those clean vocals and great lyrics. I'll even put that out there with those guys. So, and kind of like reflective lyrics on your life. So I don't know. That's what I always think of when I hear some of Andrew's material, like a lot of this album, actually. I think of those references.
I agree.
I did mention at the beginning of the episode, I'll come back to that, that this piano melody in this song is perfection.
So good.
Chef's kiss.
So good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Chef's kiss.
Every time I hear it, like, it doesn't matter where I am, what I'm doing, in concert or, live or not, around the house, when that piano comes in, it gets my attention. It's like, okay, we're in it now. This
Totally.
is the song. It's pretty consistent throughout the whole song, which I really enjoy. Even in the chorus, it kind of follows the same sort of melody, I think. What I think is really unique about it is, so you talked about this being a grateful song, kind of like a bright light at maybe the end of the tunnel type thing. I don't know. The reason I put it that way is because I feel like the melody and some of the lyrics have kind of a dark edge to it. But yeah, in the end, it brightens up. Like the chorus comes in and takes that same melody and makes it like this like bright, sparkly, kind of celebratory type of thing. Like, we made it. We did this together.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like the verses are more like, okay, it's kind of dark. It's kind of like, are we going to make it? Are we not? And that's what I find really unique about the sound of it. It's just, it makes me want to follow it all the way through.
That is something that I thought about too, that it feels like it keeps your attention throughout the whole song. Like from the very first piano to the very end of the song, where it kind of changes a little bit right at the end there.
Yeah.
I think it just keeps you engaged the whole time. Like, I feel like when this song ends, I always want it to be 10 minutes longer. Like, I want there to be a 10-minute version of this
10-minute
song
version.
so bad. This song deserves a 10-minute version.
Yeah, you got to wait for the re-recording for that one.
Yeah, that'll be many years from now.
Yeah.
It's sad to think about, but I would love a 10-minute version of this song.
Oh, I would too. I maybe throw another verse or two in there. Let's get some more information about that house and about his relationship. And
I think Andrew's got to drive up to Silver Lake a couple more times.
yeah, he might have to park outside that
Get
house
writing.
a couple more times. Yeah. I guess it seems like we just get both sides of Andrew. We get the kind of a little bit of the dark, and we get the bright, more bright poppy. It gets to bright poppy at times, but not quite over the top either, in my opinion. Do you have like a favorite? So lyrics aside for now, because we haven't even got to lyrics yet. Do you have like a favorite musical piece of the song, like something that hits you extra hard? With is it just that piano melody? Or is there something else that you can pull out of there?
Well, the piano melody is really strong, but there are certain places in the song where the piano does a little flourish. There are several pieces or several times when there's a little something extra in the piano, and I love that. I think it just adds, again, that like engagement with the song. It makes you want to keep listening, and I think it's so genius to do that. Like, I think it's a remarkable thing to do. In the bridge, he does it right after he says, "All we have are mornings in bed, coffee and aspirin." And then there's like an extra little piano lick there. And I just love that. Like, I love the bridge for many reasons, and that's definitely one of them.
He kind of goes higher on the scale in the second verse too, and I love
Hmm.
that how it changes it up from the first verse. The first verse is, the melody we all know and love, and then the second verse, I'm not going to try to imitate it with my voice, but like he does something a little bit different in the second verse. It kind of goes up a little bit
Hmm.
at times, and it's really really noticeable in the Canyons version, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But it's definitely there in the original version too. Yeah, I love that little noodling he does on the piano at times. It's like it's his own flair. It's like his signature to
Hmm.
do something. It's not like something he's done in other songs, in my opinion, but it's his signature to do things like that.
It almost feels like it's a live version when he does stuff like that in
Yeah.
the recorded album.
Hmm.
I think it almost like makes people want to go see him live. If you're like hearing that in the album, you're like, wow,
Yeah.
that's cool. That's fun. And
Yep.
I feel like that would, if I wasn't a fan, that would make me a fan. That would
Hmm.
make me want to go.
Well, it definitely pulls me in deeper. That's for sure. When I hear those things.
Yeah, same.
Let's talk some lyrics. So, do you have any particular lyrics that kind of jump out at you when you hear this song?
I love the bridge. I
Hmm.
love like the swelling to the bridge and then the lyrics in the bridge. I remember screaming this many, many a times at his live shows because it feels like catharsis. Like it feels like the bridge is like it's like letting out all of the bad stuff that you went through. It's like throwing it out like at that bridge. And I've always loved that bridge and I will always continue to scream it. It's
Yeah.
my favorite.
It's the build. It's the build
Mm-hmm.
before the close of the song. It builds right up to that bridge. So I gotta say, I love every lyric in this song because I feel like I can relate so much to what he's saying. Like I feel like I can find a piece of my life everywhere in these lyrics. I can't do that with all Andrew music. There's a lot of his lyrics that I can relate to, but it's rare that I somehow find a piece of my life in every one of these lyrics. I already talked about the parked outside the house we used to live. That's a little too close to home. There's a light left on inside. Think of all the days we'd spend orchestrating accidents, lights that used to blind us. Somehow they will guide us through the night. It's like I get these visuals. I can see the house I grew up in. It's like I'm seeing a movie in my mind of the comparison between when I lived there versus the new people that are there now occupying what I call my home, which is interesting because it hasn't been my home for the majority of my life at this point. It's very relatable. I love that we get essentially two verses in one in that first verse. If you don't mind, I'm just going to read through the whole first verse.
Yeah, no, please do. Please do.
Following the outline of your face, I can see your breath move in the dark. Through all the autopilot years, the tears of joy, the face of fear, now that we're not hiding, somehow you're still riding in my car. I know that whole piece is about, that whole like Kelly and him survived all the hard times. Somehow they made it through, even when it was robotic. It was just almost forgettable time that they just had to get through, like the autopilot years. I think
Hmm.
we can all identify with that, whether there were years or months of our life where we don't really remember it because we were just surviving. We were just getting through that time. We had, whether it was school, whether it was a relationship, whether it was, something we had to make it through the other side, or maybe in some people's cases, something so traumatic that they don't want to remember it, but they know it was there. But I love the visuals we get in that second piece of the first verse. I can almost see Kelly's face in the car with him when he's singing those lyrics.
Yeah, I can see your breath move in the dark. Like that is
Yeah, I can
amazing.
see your breath move in the dark.
Who wrote that? I mean,
Yeah,
that's such a good line. It's so good.
yeah, and I love how he ends that piece. Somehow you're still riding in my car. It's that line's so simple actually, but like it's like so important to the story. It's like you're still here after all that, and you stuck by me. The things that I did and the things that happened to me, and some of the things he could control and some of the things he couldn't control. It didn't always occur to me that he starts the first and the second verse the same way, parked outside the house we used to live. But I guess that's why that line reigns so important to me, because it's accented at the very beginning of the song and then starts the second half of the song, in my opinion. So I realize it now that, yeah, he starts the verses the same way, but then goes into kind of a little bit more detail. So in the second verse, parked outside the house we used to live, staring down the green roof and the walls, the balcony, the hills, the pain, the years of hope, the months of rain. Now that we're outside it, I guess we survived it after all. That's heavy.
Yeah, you're right. There is like a darkness to those verses, but it seems like there's a darkness to the verses, and then that last line of the verse just brings it back up again, like brings
Right.
it back. It's almost like he's like reminiscing in the back and like getting kind of sad about it, and then it's almost like a moment of mindfulness
Mm-hmm.
of like, oh, but here we are, like here you
Mm-hmm.
still are, here we survived it. I think of mindfulness a lot when I think of Andrew, and so I feel like that really, it's like he takes a moment to like whoop snap back to the present and think
Mm-hmm.
about where he is now.
It's one of those lines that gets me in the heart when I'm listening on the album and in concert. It's like, I guess we survived it after all. And I know this is his story. I got to admit, I can't relate to that line nearly as much as I'm sure he can. But, you can apply that to, anything that you've made it through in your life. I guess we survived it. And, looking back at all this, we came through it. I love that verse right there. It's he starts just talking about the house, but then it's like he's zooming out, looking at the bigger picture. The balcony, the hills, the pain, the years of hope. So he's like looking at a bigger picture now, the years and the months of rain, which I'm sure signifies the more difficult times in his life. So yeah, and then I didn't read the chorus, but I think everybody knows the chorus. Did you want to talk about the chorus at all? I mean, it is a great chorus. I do love it. We get the primary line, "All we have is time," of course. I just saw again recently, I think it was on Reddit or maybe the Pop Underground Facebook group, someone posted a tattoo they got with those lines, "All we have is time." And I feel like I've seen that before because what a great line. What a simple, great line.
I have the lithograph
Oh,
framed
do
in
you?
front of me at my desk right now. So yeah, it's a special one to me. And it's also signed. I
Oh,
forgot.
nice. I was gonna generalize more, and I should have then to say that yeah, it seems like a lot of artwork has come out of a lot of visual art has come out of the song's lyrics, whether it be on someone's skin or in a lithograph, or I think probably Dear Jack teams have made put the quote on a shirt at times. I'm sure. I think one of the Dear Jack teams might be even named after some of the lyrics in the song. The lyrics just show up. I just think it's important to a lot of his hardcore fans.
Hmm.
You talked about the bridge, no white picket fence, no job with the government. Now I have more insight into what that means. Thank you very much.
Hmm.
But all we have are mornings in bed, coffee and aspirin. All we have. I remember somebody referencing somewhere in the fan group coffee and aspirin at some point, and I'm like, where does that come from? And then the very next time I heard Maps for the Getaway, I'm like, of course, it's right there, coffee and aspirin, because I thought they were referencing I'm ready. I need caffeine to the bloodstream
Hmm.
for some reason. So I remember thinking that at the time. And I don't know if he was referencing like a hangover or just a hard night, late night. I don't know, but I do love these lines. And of course, the song ends. All we have is time, and can't agree with you more. When the song ends, I just want it to keep going. Like, give me another verse. Give me more of those. All we have is times. I don't care. I just want it to keep going. So maybe we can make a you know a stand for an extended version in concert. Probably not, but I know he likes to get as many songs in as he can for his fans, for us. But yeah, it'd be cool to have like a little extension on the end, like maybe some more piano noodling at the end. So
Well, and I think he did an extended version. In May of 2015, there's a YouTube video from the Virginia Beach Patriotic Festival,
hmm
where they did this amazing extended outro of Maps. And it is so, so wonderful. When I found that video, I like immediately saved it. I was like, this is so good. I want them to do that always.
can you send that to me? I didn't know about
Yeah.
that. Oh, that'd be awesome. I think overall, if I'm so I asked you earlier, what's your favorite musical part of it, and you had a great answer. Do you have a favorite lyric in this song? Is it the bridge? Is that where you'd go? Like if we were talking like very favorite lyrics in the song?
I think the bridge does a great job at being a succinct mini story of the whole song. I think, it's like resisting the like white picket fence you thought you would love. It's like resisting that like sucky job with the government. And it's like focusing on these small joys that we have. And
Hmm.
like all we have is time. The bridge lyrics really do it for me because it's the perfect nugget of what that song is about. It
Hmm.
shows exactly what that song is about in 2 lines of lyrics, and that is a feat and beautiful to me.
I really appreciate the line, as simple as it sounds, is all we have is time. And the reason is it can mean so many different things to anyone listening to it. And it means certainly something different to me than it does to you, and which may have been different from what Andrew meant when he wrote it. But I love how universal that line can be and what it could mean to so many people.
Yeah, and it's like the simplest thing that we have in this life is the time that we have in it, and the most valuable thing.
Yeah.
And it's like we have to take each moment and live it and be there for it. We can look back and have regrets, but we made the choices that we made for a reason. We were doing the things we were doing in the past for a reason. And it's okay to look back, but we shouldn't beat ourselves up about it, because we still have all this time. Like all we have is time and we still have some left. And we should use it the best we can.
Well said. We got to talk about the Canyons version of this song, because if our emo hearts weren't already singing it to ourselves, I mean, wow. The Canyons version. I'm sure anybody listening to this episode has heard the Canyons version, but if for some reason you haven't, you've got to listen to it. For those that don't know, there were 4 songs off of the self-titled Wilderness album, recorded also as what he called the Canyons versions, and they were mostly just Andrew and a piano, although there's some backing vocals and there's some other things going on in the background, but nothing is quite as plain. Nothing's quite as clear, I should say. Nothing's quite as clear as just his vocals and the piano. It just sounds so intimate. I've said that, I know, before on the show about these Canyons versions. That's the best word I have to describe it, is intimate.
I was delighted when he released the Canyons versions of the songs. I was so thrilled that Maps got one of them because it's obviously my favorite song in that album. Yeah, and it's so, yeah, intimate is the perfect word truly to describe it. It feels like you're right there with him when he's singing that song in that version.
I picture him at a house on a lake with big picturesque windows, but it's at night and there's candles all over the piano. And that's the visual I get. I can close my eyes and listen to those versions, including Maps for the Getaway, and I can visualize that, like you said, like you're in the room with him. And what doesn't hurt it, in my opinion, is the backing vocals come through really clearly. So whomever's doing those backing vocals, I assume it's the 2 producers, because they're listed as the backing vocals in the album credits. But yeah, somebody's doing some great backing vocals on this version, and it comes through really nicely in the choruses especially. I noted at the 140 mark, so if you go back and listen to this as it goes into the second verse, that I was talking about that earlier, how the piano kind of goes up and changes a little bit for the second verse. That's what I was referencing. It happens in the album version too, but it's very
Mm-hmm.
obvious that he's doing something different in the Canyons version. I don't know. It sounds goofy, but it makes my heart flutter a little bit when it gets to that point. It's like, oh my gosh, like what was that? When I hear that, I just love the way that sounds. It's something about the way this guy plays piano. I don't know. Like I said, it's kind of trademark Andrew. It's right as he says the beginning of the second verse, parked outside the house we used to live, for
Mm.
reference. But
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
so the
I
second time he
remember
says
that
that
now.
line, yeah,
Yep.
in this version in particular, it's just really special. It also occurred to me this week that this is the last song that I'm covering on from the Canyons EP. I've now covered all 4 of them on the show.
Oh, wow.
It's the last time I guess I'll talk directly about the Canyons EP, which is kind of crazy. I think these versions took these songs to the next level for me. Again, just like hearing the song in concert in 2015, it may be one of those reasons that this particular song has stuck so well with me. Maybe it just kind of it deepened my interest in the song, gave me more reasons to love it, this version. So I'd highly recommend it. There's versions out there on YouTube, of course, like the Instagram live stream I mentioned of him playing it on just a piano, but you're not going to get a better studio quality version of him playing it just on piano other than this
Yeah.
version. So you might as well just listen to this version if you want just the piano only. But I love the original version too. And I've really gushed about this Canyons version now for a minute or two, but I love it. They released it as an EP first, and then I guess they like called it part of the deluxe edition of the album when that was re-released a year later
Oh,
in
I didn't realize that.
2015. So I think if you go on Spotify, that's how it's listed as part of the deluxe edition.
Oh.
So, and I
Yeah,
think,
I know there was some alternative album image for the Canyons too.
oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, the blue is gray, I think.
Hmm.
Now there's no official music video for this. I'm pretty okay with that because I like the visuals it gives me in my mind. I found someone, it must have been her college project. I was searching maps for the getaway on YouTube, and I came across this person's, I don't want to say homemade. I mean, it's pretty good quality. It's not just like somebody running around with a camera in their backyard, but it was a college project. The woman's name is Megan Griesbeck, and she made a music video for this song as part of what I think, like I said, is a college project. Did you have a chance to check that out? I sent you the
I
link.
didn't, but now I wish I had though, because I want to be able to see
That's
it and
okay.
talk about it.
I'll tell you a little bit about it, and I'll tell
Okay.
those listening about it, and then I encourage you to go check it out if you want to. But it's what you'd expect. It's a couple that's struggling through some hard times, and they go on a road trip, and so some of it's very literal, some of it is not as much. I don't think the storyline's linear, so it's a little confusing as to when is this? Was this before that? I don't know. Hey, that's art, right? I mean, like it's like trying to read Andrew's lyrics and interpret them for yourself. It's the same. It's like you
Hmm.
can watch the video and interpret it. What she meant by the visuals. But I thought it was pretty cool. I didn't realize that making music videos for other people's music was like a thing until I did
Oh
this
yeah.
podcast. But it obviously this song meant a lot to her too. But they had what looked to be college age or maybe just out of college age actors and or whatever, and being a couple and kind of taking a little road trip and going through some hard times, and then kind of there's a little resolution at the end. So I recommend it. She obviously put a lot of work into it. It wasn't one of those types of music videos that I was like, oh man, now I have a different visual, because I think the visuals in my brain for this song are so ingrained that I don't think anything I watch set to this music could really touch that. So you clearly love this song. It's
Hmm.
your favorite song on the self-titled album. I might say the
Definitely.
same. It's definitely up there. There are some other contenders. This probably sits at the top, if not close.
I mean, this album in general, I think is very, very high on my
Hmm.
list for him
Yeah.
and his work. I mean, actually, I'm just gonna go as far as to say it is my favorite album of his. I think
Oh,
it's
okay. More than
wonderfully
the Glass Passenger,
cohesive.
huh?
More than Glass Passenger.
Yeah.
I think it is cohesive in a way that I think his other albums don't have as much. And I think it's all the songs are just so beautifully put together. And yeah, so I think Maps is it's probably my favorite Andrew McMahon song. I think that's
Oh.
that's why I chose it. I think I when I looked at all of the different episodes that you had done, I was secretly hoping Maps hadn't been done. And
Hmm.
so I think that was my sign. I was like, yeah, if I'm searching and hoping that Maps wasn't done yet, I think it's probably my favorite.
I'm glad that you suggested it because, like I said, it was one of those I wouldn't say I was saving it at all because I don't save songs, but it was just sitting there. Nobody had suggested it, and I hadn't done it on my own. I've done episodes on my own, and I hadn't done that one, but I thought maybe one day I would do that on my own because it's such a special song to me. It's now a 9-year-old song, but it's one that just doesn't leave the playlist for me.
Yeah, it stands the test of time for sure.
Hmm.
And I feel like I'm such a sucker for songs at the ends of albums. And I feel
Yeah.
like a lot of people skip songs at the ends of albums. Like people don't like them as much because I feel like
Hmm.
a lot of songs near on the last half of albums are sometimes slower, or there's sometimes like a ballad thrown in there at the end. And I feel like it's always the last half of albums that like just hit me so hard. And I've noticed that in his other albums too,
Oh.
and with other artists as well. So I feel like it's no surprise that I love Maps so much.
He has a pretty good track record. Andrew has a pretty good track record for final tracks. I mean, Smoking Ribbons on the latest album is just the latest example, but I can go back through all the albums, and you could too. And he has some pretty strong finishers on his album. So I think the things, the notes that those journalists made in the articles we quoted earlier can be said about several of his albums. Like, oh, what a perfect ending to this album. So I think he saves that strong track for the end, one of the strong tracks for the end.
For sure.
Yeah. I've got some fun facts for you. Did you know this song was featured on an episode of a TV show called Quantico in 2015?
What?
In the same episode as Canyon Moon, apparently.
No, I did not know this.
Do you know the show?
I have heard of the show, but I mean, wow, I'm shocked.
Unfortunately, I could not find a clip online. But I did think about it earlier today. I was like, so 10 years earlier, he had a couple of songs on One Tree Hill.
Yes, which I know about.
Which is a very like teen show, right? I think. And so 10 years later, his music is on like a very probably grown up show, like something our parents watch. I'm going to guess. I don't know. Yeah, I was curious to find a clip, but I could not find a clip of either song in a Quantico episode. But I did read that.
Do you know what episode it was in? Like, I want to like hunt for this now.
I may be able to find out. I'll go back to where I found that information and see. But it was in October 2015. I know that much. But there were probably 3 or 4 episodes in that month, so I don't know if it listed the episode number. It might have. I'll see if I can find it.
That was a fun fact. That was awesome.
The other one I have is more modern fact. There is a book written by an Annie England Noblin, published in June 2021, called Maps for the Getaway. When I Googled this song title, there's only 2 subjects that come up. One is the song, and the other is now the book. So I have to believe that Annie England Noblin is an Andrew McMahon fan.
Gotta be.
Because was that a saying before? I don't think Maps for the Getaway was a saying.
I don't think so. I mean, I had never heard that.
Google has no evidence of that, so I'm going to say she's probably an Andrew McMahon fan. The description of the book does not pertain to anything within the content of the lyrics of the song. Don't get me wrong. Maybe there's some slight reference somewhere in the book.
And if you're listening, reach on out.
Yeah, reach out and hey, I'll have you on the show, and we can talk about maybe other future book titles that you might be using.
Maps for the Getaway episode part 2.
Thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. I had a lot of fun. It was, like I said, it's just so great going back and forth about a song we both love so much. Do you have any final thoughts about the song itself?
I have heard so many stories of prior to him singing the song. Like, I've heard so many of these little like stories about what the song means and stuff that it makes me want to listen to more episodes of the podcast. And because I haven't listened to every single episode of the podcast, but I'd love to hear more so that I can tell you all of the stories that I've heard that maybe weren't talked about on the episode.
Oh yeah, please feel free to share. I love when people chat me after they listen to an episode. There's a few people that'll chat me after they listen to each episode, and they'll have like feedback for me. I love that. That's part of the fun with this is hearing from people and what their thoughts are. So
yeah, like there's some standouts to me. Like Watch the Sky is like always a good story. Woke Up in a Car, like fun stories. Rainy Girl is definitely my favorite one. So yeah, I'm excited to hear all of these episodes because then I can tell you all the stories.
Well, thanks everybody for listening. Please, if you would, leave a rating on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else that you can to help people find it. Make a comment on one of our socials. Email me at somethinginthewilderness@gmail.com if you want to be a guest, or hit me up on Instagram. And again, big thank you to Aly for joining the show tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I had a great time.
Yep. Gas in the tank, maps for the getaway. All we have is time.